Have you ever wondered why Dungeons & Dragons attributes are rolled on 3d6 only to be converted into a modifier? Back in 1st edition, attributes weren't converted to modifiers. Instead, players often rolled the d20 against the attribute directly. Over the decades, this rule slowly faded away and the modifiers emerged. Nonetheless, attributes are still generated by rolling 3d6. This is an example of what I like to call a rule artifact, a way of doing things left over from previous editions of the game. There are costs to keeping artifacts. For example, D&D could use an alternate generation system using 2 differently colored 6-sided dice, one designated negative, the other positive, roll them together, and use the lower one as your modifier. This generates a similar range of modifiers. So why don't they do that? Mostly because it's a recognizable part of creating a character. Branding is important, especially for a product with as much industry clout as Dungeons & Dragons. In addition, it allows you to keep using older adventures and books with newer rule sets. And finally, there's nothing saying you can't just use the old rule. But what about another artifact, saving throws? A saving throw cuts the damage your character takes in half in certain situations. In 1st edition of Dungeons & Dragons, there were 5. Death Ray and Poison, all wands, Stone, Dragon Breath, and Staves and Spells. These 5 numbers varied based on your class and level, and nothing else. They took up space in the character sheet too, but they were actually pretty useful and they weren't based on your individual character. I call these near artifacts, pieces of an older system that could be better integrated into a new system. 5th edition did just that. They're based now upon your attributes rather than upon a random number in your class. And yes, they're still based on class. This is certainly more complex, but now instead of being generic, they vary for each individual and can cover a wider range of situations, which is what the saving throws were initially intended to do. So, perhaps like me, you're working on a second or subsequent edition of your game. You've changed the system a lot, but haven't thrown it out for a completely new system. Or perhaps you've just created and recreated a system enough times that artifacts have emerged. Whichever situation you're in, watch out for artifacts and near artifacts. They lead to a disjointed system. Anyways, that's just what I've been thinking about. Have yourself a great day, and dooey!